Right, let's take two. Hopefully the microphone is not off this time. Thanks to my 2-year-old for turning that off and me not noticing. Right. Round 9, Super Rugby. Saturday games done and dusted. Away teams having more success than what we're used to seeing this season in Super Rugby. So 3 out of the 5 results going the way of the away team. One of them expected, the other 2 not really quite. But yeah, let's start with the Blues and the Sunwolves. Blues went into Tokyo, beat the Sunwolves 24 points to 10, 4 tries to 1. So Highland with 2, Akiriani with 1, Dalton Papali'i with the 1, Lafayette just the 1 for the Sunwolves. So I guess Sunwolves, it's another loss. If there was a game where you had kind of a mental edge or a mental advantage over your opposition, it was this one against the Blues because of last year's result. Just that doubt and the pressure on the Blues to get a result this time, it was definitely there, especially with the Blues' performances this season being so poor. They had to get a result this week. They did it with the bonus point, but it's like the minimum expected because, I mean, if they'd just gotten a win, it probably would have been considered a fail. If they'd lost, it would have been a disaster. But they won with the bonus point, so it's like, okay, they did the job, but nothing more. They were still poor with their kicking and poor with lineouts and just generally not sharp. And they got the Highlanders next week, and that's going to be a big difference because that was not a complete performance from a top quality team. This was 2 of the cellar dwellers duking it out and kind of staying even for some periods because they're both pretty bad. I mean, the Sunwolves were up by 5 points at halftime, but in the second half, the Blues kind of just pressured them into conceding points. I guess, if anything, for the Blues, they only conceded 10 points against the Sunwolves away from home. So it's pretty rare that teams have been kind of keeping the Sunwolves to such a low score. So if nothing else, that's a positive. But there's not a whole lot of love for the Blues in this performance. I feel like they probably could have started Rico on the wing just because you saw the damage that wide runners at full tilt have on the Sunwolves. And it's not just the Japanese players that some people might assume. Like one of the tries, it was like Hayden Parker, who's a Kiwi, and Willie Britt, who's a South African, and Michael Little, who's another Kiwi, just falling off tackles, as the Blues just ran them in. So, yeah, it's a weakness the Sunwolves need to fix. If nothing else, their line-out was a lot better this week. They finally started to get things right at the line-out. Which has been a real issue for them this season. But yeah, nothing really doing for the Sunwolves this season. If they can get a win, mission accomplished, because at this point they're looking like going winless throughout the whole season. They've got the Crusaders next week, so good luck for that one. Next result, pretty big one. Highlanders 43-17 over the Brumbies. So tries to Ben Smith, Sopawanga. Ben Smith was 2. Naholo, Frizzell and Fletcher Smith. I was going to say Fraser, but it's Fletcher. Nasarani and Powell got ones in for the Sunwolves, for the Brumbies. Yeah, the scoreline probably makes it look like it was worse than it really was for the Brumbies. Because, I mean, they had the ball for quite a lot of the time, which is normal against the Highlanders, but they were doing all right. They were doing some good things against the Highlanders, but they just looked under pressure with the ball. I should say the Blues also did as well. That quick line speed from the Sunwolves was troubling for the Blues. And it was troubling for the Brumbies as well. They just looked better without the ball than with it. Like at the breakdown, they looked fine. And David Pocock's obviously a large reason for that. But, yeah, they just didn't look comfortable at all under the ball, with the ball. So, yeah, there was a kind of a turning point at this game. It was 15-10 just after halftime, 50-odd minutes in. Sopawanga gets yellow carded. And you're thinking if the Highlanders concede some points here, the Brumbies can run into trying a penalty or maybe a couple of tries, or even just a try to get them ahead if they convert it. Maybe the Highlanders, if they're chasing the game, start to kind of do silly things, or, passes don't go their way or whatever. But for all the pressure the Brumbies were putting on, they were either making mistakes or eventually, they gave away an intercept try in a holo. So the final score during the yellow card period was 7-0 to the Highlanders with a man down. So that was a real turning point. The Brumbies never looked like winning it from there. They were 22-10 down and just well off the pace. for that kind of final 20 minutes. And it showed with those final few tries to the Highlanders. Highlanders didn't take the foot off the throat, scoring in the 80th. The Brumbies probably should have just kicked it out. I think they didn't have anything to play for. But they kept playing and they were going nowhere eventually. Highlanders came back and scored another try, so to put it beyond 40, which makes it look, like I say, probably worse than it was. So the Highlanders have got the Blues next week. The Brumbies have got the Jaguares, so that'll be an interesting matchup. Next game, Jaguares 25-22 over the Rebels, so this is a bit of an upset. So the Jaguares not doing that well this season, and the Rebels have been certainly a lot better than last season, top of the Aussie Conference before this game. Cancellieri, Moyano and Escura scored tries for the Jaguares. Meeks, Korobidi and Dalen Helipeti for the Rebels. One penalty the difference. And, I mean, the Rebels were ahead for large periods of this game. They were ahead and then the Jaguares would just catch them up. The Rebels were never able to get kind of a couple tries out. They were always just... The Jaguares were always just in touching distance, and that cost them. Because, I mean, the Jaguares had the ball a lot, but just didn't look like doing anything with it. The Rebels looked for large periods like the more likely team to score. But they just didn't capitalise on those opportunities, and when the Jaguares went in front late on, the Rebels weren't able to bounce back. I mean, they put together like 35 phases at the end, but it just was not enough. Not enough to get one back over the Jaguares. It's a massive win on the road for them. You think their season's still kind of... It's going to be probably a bridge too far, even if they go on a bit of a run. But, I mean, certainly winning is better than losing in that regard. So if they can keep up some results, stranger things have happened. But, it's still going to be pretty hard from there. There was a pretty big head clash in this game with Hardwick. I'm not sure what the result of that is, if he's just got a massive concussion or what, but it was pretty sickening when you saw it. The weather actually turned kind of... I mean, it was always a bit wet, but it got pretty wet during this game, so that may have been a reason that may have played into the Jaguares' hands a bit. I don't know if it was a dry track. Maybe the Rebels would have shown a bit of extra skill and ability to get one over, but not to be in this one. Commentators were bothering me a bit by going on about how great Murphy was when he played the Hurricanes, when he only played for 40 minutes, because rugby is an 80-minute game. If you look at the All Blacks' performance in, 2007 against the French in the quarterfinals, score at halftime was pretty good if you're an All Blacks fan, but 40 minutes don't mean a whole lot, so I wish they would have toned that down a bit, but that's just me being easily annoyed, I guess. Probably because this game wasn't a great watch. It was okay. It was good. It was obviously a climactic finish in terms of the storyline, but the skills plus with the weather weren't really there for this game, so it was okay. But it's definitely not going to go down in the annals as a real classic. But it does have big implications on the Aussie Conference because the next result saw the Waratahs beat the Reds 37 points to 16. Tries to Gordon, who's been in the tries a lot recently, as has Naya Rovoro, who got 2, and Johnson Holmes picked up his first ever. Dalgunu won for the Reds. He still looks like he's going to be a try-scoring machine if he keeps fit. So yeah, the Reds are in patches, aren't they? They're just good and then bad. And this game kind of had a bit of both because they came out under the pump. The Waratahs were all over them at the start of this game, and they couldn't really get a lot going for them. But they managed to hold on. They showed some real fortitude to be only about 6-0 down after having virtually no ball or territory. And then when they finally got into the Tars half, they immediately kicked a penalty. So it was 6-3. And if you were a Tars fan, you would have been worried that, man, if we keep blowing all these chances, then we're going to give points away eventually, and the Reds might just be able to sneak one over us. But unlike that kind of Rebels game where the Rebels were never able to push far enough away, the Waratahs eventually did it in about the 70th minute They kind of blew the scoreline out a bit. So 37-16 makes it look like it was more comfortable than it was again, although the Reds never really looked like sneaking a win, if I'm honest, although they were better in the second half. It's one where you start to wonder if the Reds don't have that absolutely dominant scrum, what other kind of tools have they got in the kit to get a victory? Because accumulating points through penalties and a lot of those from scrums worked well for them in the previous weeks, but it wasn't really on the cards in this game against the Tars. Big bonus point win for the Waratahs, top of the Aussie Conference, makes things pretty interesting there going forward. Reds just starting to fall off the pace, you'd have to think. In the final game of the round, so the Sharks have gone down at home 40 points to 10. Bulls up over them, so 3 tries to Haaland. Man, the Bulls and their hat-tricks so far. Strauss got one, another one. Johnny Kutzer got one, and a penalty try for the Bulls. Just the one to Esterhuizen for the Sharks. You must be annoyed if you're a Sharks fan, because you're starting to get like one of those just hot and cold teams. I mean, they were so poor in Australia and then really on fire in New Zealand, even though they only picked up, 1 victory and 1 loss. It was an unlucky loss against the Hurricanes. And then they're just back to being poor again when they get back to South Africa. It's really bizarre. They just didn't look with it. The knock-ons, silly things like tackling guy. I mean, there was probably towards the end of the game, tackles in the air and just poor kicks and things like that. But yeah, Bulls were sharp on the other hand. Like Haaland with his kicks through, like a lot of guys can kick through to other people well, but Haaland kicks through to himself really well, helping him get a couple of tries. And yeah, chasing through another one that was a really sharp kick as well. So whether it was onside or not, TMO didn't get a perfect side on angle, so we don't know, but it was tight. I don't think it would have made a difference. The Sharks never really looked like winning this one. There was only the one lead change because the Sharks went out 3-0, and then it was all Bulls. I mean, they went out to 21-3 at one point. So there was a yellow card in this one. No points scored during it though, so it didn't really make a difference. I think the Bulls, just in most facets of the game, like the line out, like the breakdown, were just better. And I don't know what the coach does, because how do they go from that performance against the Hurricanes to this against the Bulls? I mean, they can blame the travel maybe, but it was pretty poor. Haaland, again, to go on about him, his defence looked better as well, because I remember Mahuza made him look pretty silly early on in the season, although I think that was his first game of the season. But yeah, his defence was a lot solid today. Somebody tried to step him and just got kind of smashed, so pretty impressive. But yeah, just overall interesting results. You got to like the upsets. It kind of helps the comp continue with a bit of interest, because just the same old teams winning all the time gets a bit boring. But if you're an Aussie looking against those kind of Kiwi games, that's another derby game, or not derby game, Trans-Tasman game, which has gone down with a Kiwi team on top. So hopefully an Aussie team can buck the trend at some point this season. The Blues look pretty vulnerable, so maybe that's one to target. The Waratahs have the Lions next week, so that's a good one to look for, by the way. It's a kind of top of the conference battle for Aussie Conference and South African Conference. The Reds have got a chance to break the New Zealand hoodoo when they take on the Chiefs. Reds will need to certainly... They've been on the road a lot, so to be fair, can't judge them too harshly. It's really hard to win on the road. They haven't been at home for a long time. If they can pick things up, and the Chiefs, God, their scrum might be vulnerable now that they've lost another prop. But yeah, we'll see how that one goes. Maybe it's a chance for the Reds to pick one up. The Bulls host the Rebels at Loftus. The Sharks host the Stormers, so hopefully some Sharks fans turn out after a pretty disappointing result. I know the weather wasn't great. Should have mentioned the weather in that game was really bad. It was hosing down But again, I don't think it had an influence on the game because the balls just looked sharper for much of it. So yeah, that's the round. I finally found a whiteboard on my end. I'm still getting settled in here. Technical issues, other things, trying to sort out stuff, but hopefully things are going to be good. See how things go. I'm going to sort out some power rankings in a minute, so we'll see how that goes. And all things going according to plan, I should have those out tomorrow. Alright guys, I will talk to you again soon.